Welcome to this video on the rule of reciprocity in negotiation. Every negotiation is about achieving goals and gaining an advantage by getting the other side to accept what you are offering. One of the most effective strategies to achieve this goal is applying the reciprocity rule. The rule of reciprocity states that when we receive something from somebody, we like to reciprocate the gesture. This means that when others do something good or give something to us, we feel obliged to give something of equal value back to them. In negotiations, you can use this rule effectively to influence the other party's behavior and help achieve your objectives. In this video, we will look closer at the rule of reciprocity and how you can use it to succeed in negotiations. Then, we will discuss examples and strategies you can use in your negotiations to get the other side to accommodate you and support you in reaching your objectives. In the context of negotiations, reciprocity refers to the two-way relationship between parties in which each side is willing to give something to the other to receive something from the other in return. The basic idea is that if one party does something for the other side will be more willing to do something to maintain or improve the relationship. In negotiation tactics, the rule of reciprocity is often used to influence negotiation outcomes. For example, suppose you do your negotiating partner a small favor or give them a small concession. In that case, they are more likely to be willing to provide you with something similar. One example might be to give your negotiating partner some time during the negotiation to confer with his senior management before he accepts your proposals. If he sees this as a friendly gesture, he will be more inclined to do you a favor later by making a concession. However, we emphasize that reciprocity should not be used as a manipulation strategy. Both parties want to be treated fairly and for the relationship to be built on trust and respect. For example, suppose one party feels they are being taken advantage of or the other side is acting dishonestly. In that case, this can affect trust in the relationship and have a negative impact on long-term business relationships. Negotiations are often about each side trying to get the best for itself. Reciprocity, however, can help both parties achieve a win-win situation where they both end up with more than they had to start with. The idea behind creating value through reciprocity is that each party tries to increase value for the other party by giving them something they want or need. Suppose both parties can understand and consider the needs and interests of the other. In that case, this can lead to a mutually beneficial outcome. An example could be that you are negotiating a contract with a potential client. You want a reasonable price but also want to ensure the client feels they are getting a fair deal. You can use reciprocity by offering the customer additional benefits or services of great value. By making the customer feel that you are responding to their needs and adding value, the likelihood that they will be willing to give you more business or recommend you to others increases. Creating value through reciprocity aims to build a long-term and sustainable relationship between the parties. Suppose both parties feel treated fairly and benefit from the relationship. In that case, there is a greater likelihood that they will work together in the long term and continue to develop their relationship. You've probably once visited a supermarket and there you receive a gift, for nothing. Be that a beer glass, food or a new drink to taste. Unsolicited giving in negotiations refers to giving something to a negotiating partner without them asking for it. It can be a form of reciprocity in negotiations where one party hopes that the other will later give something back in return. It can help to loosen up negotiations and strengthen trust between the parties. For example, giving your negotiating partner useful information or a small gesture during the negotiation can enhance trust in your relationship. Unsolicited giving has the potential to improve negotiation outcomes. For example, offer your negotiating partner an advantage that will benefit them. As a result, they may be more willing to help you similarly or make concessions later. However, this approach can also have disadvantages. For example, suppose it is misunderstood or seen as a manipulative tactic. In that case, it can affect trust between the parties and make the negotiation process more difficult. Ensure that unsolicited giving is done in a fair, transparent way and at eye level. For example, it is seen as a friendly gesture or an offer of value focused on both parties' common interests. In that case, it can help to improve negotiations. However, suppose you feel that your unsolicited giving is misunderstood or rejected. In that case, it is important to keep the communication open and transparent and ensure that you and your negotiating partner are negotiating as equals. The conditional principles state that concessions in a negotiation should be conditional. This means that one party only makes concessions if the other party gives something in return or is willing to meet certain conditions. This principle ensures that both parties are willing to compromise and that negotiations are conducted fairly and rationally. In addition, by attaching conditions to their concessions, the parties ensure they do not give more than they receive. An example of its use in negotiation might be as follows. One party might be willing to offer a lower price for a product, but only if the other party is ready to place a larger order. In this case, the concession is conditional, ensuring both parties reach an outcome fairly and rationally. The conditional principle can also help negotiations to be more transparent and effective. By setting the conditions in advance, misunderstandings or ambiguities can be avoided. As a result, the parties can conduct their negotiations on this basis and the outcome can be more satisfactory for all parties. However, the conditional principle does not mean that one party always makes concessions only if the other does. Instead, look at it as a principle that ensures that both parties in a negotiation are willing to compromise to achieve a balanced outcome. The contrast principle in negotiation refers to the technique whereby one party makes an offer that is deliberately unattractive or exaggerated to get the other party to accept what appears to be a better offer. You can apply this principle in different ways. For example, a salesperson who wants to sell an expensive product may first show the customer an even more expensive product to make the next offer seem more attractive. The contrast principle effectively allows the negotiating party to change their perspective or adjust their ideas about what is appropriate. However, some will use it unethically to manipulate or exploit another party. Therefore, we suggest using the contrast principle with other negotiation techniques, such as sympathy, or in fact laying the facts on the table. It needs to be used more carefully and intelligently. Used manipulatively, it can affect trust between the parties or lead to a negative dynamic in the negotiation. Ensure that the contrast principle is used fairly and in an ethical manner so that parties have a balanced and reasonable negotiation. A well-known example of using the contrast principle in a presentation is the introduction of the iPad by Steve Jobs in 2010. Apple had already launched the iPhone and Jobs used the contrast principle to present the iPad as revolutionary and groundbreaking compared to the iPhone. Jobs begins his presentation by reminding the audience that Apple already had the iPhone and the MacBook on offer. Then he pulls the iPad out of his pocket and says, "Today, we are introducing the iPad. It's incredible. Much better than a smartphone, much better than a laptop." Jobs uses the contrast principle by presenting the iPad as something between a smartphone and a laptop. He shows the audience how the iPad was larger than an iPhone but still light and portable. He also emphasizes how easy it is to use and how it offers a completely new experience for users. By positioning the iPad in relation to the iPhone and the MacBook, Jobs uses the contrast principle to present the iPad as something that had never existed before. The presentation was a great success and helped make the iPad one of the best-selling tablet computers in the world. The principle of acceptance follows rejection is a negotiating tactic of first making a larger request that is likely to be rejected and then making a minor request that is more likely to be accepted. The principle is based on the human behavior that one is more inclined to accept a request if it seems smaller or more reasonable than a previous one. An example of applying the principle might be as follows. A car salesperson might first offer a customer an expensive car with many extras, knowing that the customer is likely to reject it. Then the salesperson could offer the customer a cheaper car with some additions but less than the original offer. The customer will find the second offer more acceptable and reasonable because he compares it with the first offer and thinks that the salesperson is accommodating him. This principle can be used in many negotiation situations, especially when one feels that the other party will say no to a significant demand. However, it is also important to note that this tactic should be used ethically to achieve a balanced negotiation outcome and not damage the relationship with the other party. There are other ways to apply the rule of reciprocity in negotiations. Here are some examples. One way is to make offers that are beneficial to both parties. By trying to create a mutual benefit, you increase the likelihood that the other party will be willing to make concessions. Another example is to offer future incentives. Doing so can improve the relationship with the other party and motivate him to make concessions in return. For instance, once a particular order threshold has been reached, you can build incentives into the contract, such as a retrospective rebate. A rather unexpected way to apply the rule of reciprocity in negotiations is to concede first. By being the first to make concessions, you can also motivate the other party to make concessions. However, use this tactic only in certain situations. Otherwise, you run the risk of being perceived as weak. Would you like to expand your knowledge of negotiation and persuasion? Then our Persuasion in Negotiation course is for you. This comprehensive course will help you improve various skills, including persuading others and negotiating successfully. In addition, we will teach you strategies to communicate effectively and evaluate situations, thus increasing your confidence when dealing with others.